I just finished public school, I'll tell you it's great. Waking up at 6 a.m. to pledge allegiance to the state. Yeah, it's true. I got my public school blues.
The name of this piece is As Children's Freedom Has Declined, So Has Their Creativity. This is written by Peter Gray, who does a great blog.
Sounds like not a surprise at all to us.
No. But Psychology Today, it's called Freedom to Learn. Peter Gray is the author. And I wanted to share this and hopefully get some thoughts from the chat and from the phones. So here we go. Oh, I need my glasses, my reading glasses. It's very silly looking.
I don't know. I think it's cool.
Yeah, I think
I'm a big glasses fan. I often wish my eyes were bad so that I could wear glasses.
So this is cool?
Yeah.
Cool.
Absolutely.
All right. As Children's Freedom Has Declined, So Has Their Creativity by Peter Gray. If anything makes Americans stand tall internationally, it is creativity. American ingenuity is admired everywhere. We are not the richest country, at least as measured by the smallest percentage in poverty, nor the healthiest, far from it, nor the countries whose kids score highest on standardized tests, despite our politicians' misguided intentions to get us there. But we are the most inventive country. We are the great innovators, specialists in figuring out new ways of doing things and new things to do. Perhaps this derives from our frontier beginnings or from our unique form of democracy with its emphasis on individual freedom and respect for nonconformity. When did he write this? Geez, just a year ago. Someone should update him on it. I think he tends to be more of a lefty, this guy. But I really like he did more good than bad in his work for sure.
I think there are lots of people who would like to believe that that's what we are all about.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times people use democracy kind of overly synonymous with freedom.
Sure.
So I think that's more what it means. Like democracy is basically your life is governed by idiots.
Right.
So that's I think it's a synonym for freedom. In the business world as well as in academia, in the arts and elsewhere, creativity is our #1 asset. In a recent IBM poll, 1,500 CEOs acknowledged this when they identified creativity as the best predictor of future success. It is sobering, therefore, to read Kyung-Hee Kim's recent research report documenting continuous decline in creativity among American schoolchildren over the last 2 or 3 decades. Kim, who is a professor of education at the College of William and Mary, analyzed scores on a battery of measures of creativity called the Torrance tests of creative thinking, collected from normative samples of school children in kindergarten through 12th grade over several decades. According to Kim's analyses, the scores on these tests at all grade levels begin to decline somewhere between 1984 and 1990 and have continued to decline ever since. The drop in scores are highly significant statistically, in some cases, very large. In Kim's words, the data indicate that, quote, children have become less emotionally expressive, less energetic, less talkative, and verbally expressive, less humorous, less imaginative, less unconventional, less lively and passionate, less perceptive, less apt to connect seemingly irrelevant things, less synthesizing, and less likely to see things from a different angle. According to Kim's research, all aspects of creativity have declined, but the biggest decline is in the measure called creative elaboration, which assesses the ability to take a particular idea and expand on it in an interesting and novel way. Between 1984 and 2008, the average elaboration score on the TTCT for every age group from kindergarten through 12th grade fell by more than 1 standard deviation. Stated differently, this means that more than 85% of children in 2008 scored lower on this measure than did the average child in 1984. You might wonder how creativity can be assessed. By definition, any test with questions that have just one right answer or one correct pathway to solution is not a test of creativity. The Torrance tests were developed by E. Paul Torrance in the late 1950s when he was an education professor at the University of Minnesota. During the immediate post-Sputnik period, the U.S. government was concerned with identifying and fostering giftedness among American school children so as to catch up with the Russians, whom we mistakenly thought were ahead of us in scientific innovation. Well, most of Torrance, why didn't they just like fake a moon landing? Trying to make kids more creative. Don't they understand the dangers of that? While most of Torrance's colleagues focused on standard measures of intelligence as a path toward doing this, Torrance chose to focus on creativity. His prior work with fighter pilots in the Air Force had convinced him that creativity was the central variable underlying personal achievement and the ability to adapt to unusual conditions. He set about developing a test in which people are presented with various kinds of stimuli and are asked to do something with them that is interesting and novel, that is, creative. The eventual result was the set of tests that now bear his name. In the most often used of these tests, the stimuli are marks on paper, such as a squiggly line or a set of parallel lines and circles, and the task is to make drawings that incorporate and expand on those stimuli. The drawings are scored according to the degree to which they include qualities as originality, such qualities as originality, meaningfulness, and humor. You ever done anything like this just on your own?
Not that I can recollect. I'm sure I probably have.
Did you ever have a notebook in school with lined paper on it?
Sure.
Have you ever seen the things the kids do in the margins there?
Absolutely. Yeah, I used to do that all the time.
That's how I got into drawing buildings.
Huh. I was never able to draw anything that could remotely be considered meaningful.
I think my drawings were very meaningful.
I'm sure yours were.
Once I learned about the vanishing points. You ever have any kind of art class where you learned vanishing points?
No.
Like the lines of a building, like say take a very long building, like the building in Baltimore at Camden Yards, right? That big long factory building.
Sure.
It's like 1,100 feet long, right? So if you stand there and you look at it, even though throughout that whole building, the top ridge of the building and where the building meets the ground are parallel lines, if you look at them through your perception, you'll see they appear to narrow to, if the building went on forever, to a vanishing point, right? So when you can learn to draw in 3D once you understand how vanishing points work, and what you do is like say I'm trying to draw just like what's an easy kind of building, or like the World Trade Center would have been an easy building to draw, right? Because it's very just straight. And so in the corners of the picture, in the corners of the piece of paper, I would just put 2 dots, and those become the vanishing point. So that gives me the perspective of how I'm doing the drawing. So all my lines that are really the sides of the building, with a ruler, I line them up so they all line up to that point. And then, gosh, I wish we had one of those telestrators so I could show the audience this. Most people know what I'm talking about. I think so.
Sure.
But that was where I did all my best drawings, on that lined paper, because they already give you the straight lines.
Ah,
right?
That's why they're there. How about graph paper? You got even more lines.
Graph paper. What did I use? You know what I used graph paper for? Drawing baseball fields. Because it was really easy to get like you could do the diamond just by coloring in one of the graphs, right? But then if you have the baseball diamond, every now you have a scale, because every line is 90 feet, the distance from one base to the next. So then I could just draw up 3. That would be the distance to the right field fence. Should I write a book about shitty drawings that I did in school?
I guess. The only thing I ever remember graph paper for was they insisted we have it for chemistry class to keep our lab notes. And I never understood the point. Like, we weren't using it for its graph paperness purpose. We were just writing, like, words, descriptions of procedures and whatnot. Like, why wouldn't you use normal lined notebook paper for that?
Did you ever ask?
Probably not. But knowing myself, maybe I did. And I probably didn't ask. I probably said, this is bullshit. What are we doing this for?
But you did it.
I did it.
Think about all that graph paper. Now, too bad we didn't know each other then. Because you could have just been the rebel doing it on line paper. And you could have traded me the graph paper and I could have given you drawings.
Right. Woo!
Like, hey, Osborne, I'll meet you after school and give you this back with some drawings on it.
I'll bring you some heroin that I made in chemistry class.
The best evidence that the Torrance tests really do measure creativity potential came from longitudinal research showing strong statistically significant correlations between childhood scores on the TT-CT and subsequent real-world achievements. As the authors of one article commenting on these results put it, higher scores, quote, tallied more books, dances, radio show, art exhibits, software programs, advertising campaigns, hardware innovations, music compositions, public policies written or implemented, leadership positions, invited lectures, and buildings designed than did those who scored lower. Indeed, the TTCT seems to be the best predictor of lifetime achievement that has been invented. It is a better predictor than IQ, high school grades, or peer judgments of who will achieve the most. That's a yearbook superlative, I believe. The correlation coefficients between childhood TTCT scores and real-world adult creative achievements have ranged from a low of about 0.25 to a high of about 0.6, depending on which tests are included and how adult creative achievements are assessed. So the decline in TTCT scores among school-age children indeed does appear to be a cause for concern. Kim herself calls it the creativity crisis, and that term has been picked up in a number of articles in popular magazines. Well, surprise, surprise. For several decades, we as a society have been suppressing children's freedom to ever greater extents, and now we find their creativity is declining. Creativity is nurtured by freedom and stifled by continuous monitoring, evaluation, adult direction, and pressure to conform that restricts children's lives today. In the real world, few questions have one right answer. Few problems have one right solution, and that's why creativity is crucial to success in that real world. But more and more, we are subjecting children to an educational system that assumes one right answer to every question and one correct solution to every problem. A system that punishes children, and their teachers too, for daring to try different routes. We are also, as I documented in a previous essay, increasingly depriving children of free time outside of school to play, explore, be bored, overcome boredom, fail, overcome failure, that is, to do all they must in order to develop their full creative potential. The next essay in this series, I will present research evidence that creativity really does bloom in the soil of freedom and die in the hands of our over-directive, over-protective, over-judgmental teachers and parents. I think that for me, like, this is a simple article, and I don't think it goes beyond much of what we talked about on this show and before. But I've seen this so much. I really, really was really discouraged by when I was working with middle school kids a couple of years ago. And this was the math boy, the boy who could do all of this math in his head and was being punished for it by his teacher. So it's an incredibly frustrating thing to watch, but it's a bureaucracy and people are following procedures. And one of the reasons why I wanted to get feedback from other people in our audience, either through the chat or through the phone, is what I'm assuming that most of you have public school experience. Do you feel that creativity, which is so important, is a struggle for you? Do you have a creative outlet?
Do I have a creative, just work, I guess. I mean, pretty much all I do all day is, find ways of solving problems.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's definitely a huge degree of creativity involved there. And just, I don't know if there's been a decline in this or not, but I know just trying to hire people to do work, there's a horrible lack of creativity across everyone.
Right.
And it's really frustrating trying to make things happen when you have people who just can't think for themselves, and all they want to do is do what they're told and do exactly what they're told and not think about why they're doing what they're doing and doing what we've always done.
Right. So you're talking about creative problem solving. We're not talking about, like, I painted the duck blue because I always wanted to see a blue duck, Billy Madison kind of shit here.
So, well, that's what I was going to ask you. Is there a difference in talking about creativity between those different areas? Like, for example, I'm horrible at music, and drawing, and anything that most people would consider art.
Yeah.
Right. But then in other instances, I'm incredibly creative. Like, some company has you know, an issue getting a particular thing done, and I'll be able to go in and figure out how to get that done for them. You know?
Well, okay, so I think that when we're talking about like artsy kind of creativity, there's a lot less at stake. But problem-solving creativity, especially in organizations, a lot of organizations are really not that much different from governments. They're very bureaucratic. They're very fixed in ways of doing things and focused on what they call efficiency and not into people who rock boats. I mean, most of my experience is obviously, and actually all my professional experience has been in the private sector, even though some of those private sector jobs serve the public sector. And you can see that how much more rigid a private company becomes when, well, you would know this from your own experience, how much more rigid a private company becomes when they make that deal with something in the public sector. So I experienced that through tutoring, and but that's true with even just an organization. When it reaches a certain size and there's a certain number of procedures that need to be taken care of, they become bureaucratic. Right. So I think that when we're talking about creative problem solving versus just like creative blue duck painting, the problem solving aspect, especially within the context of an organization, requires courage, right? And requires confidence to stand up in front of people and say, why don't you do it this way? And when I tried to do that, and I actually did it successfully at the school where I was working, and I was really unhappy with the way one of the programs was being run, the program that I was supposedly in charge of the educational piece of. I felt like a lot of resentment for calling meetings with administrators and asking for, why are we doing this? What's the rationale behind this? And at the time, I think I was 25. So like, there's also that part of it. But I mean, usually, obviously, it's going to be the younger people with less at stake in the organization who could probably generate the more innovative ideas. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't like, I don't think I was doing anything that was incredibly innovative. It was just like, this is kind of a shitty environment. These kids aren't being treated well. It's making my job harder. It's making the job of my staff harder. We're not serving their interests, and maybe we should try different things. I don't think that what I was able to accomplish had any staying power beyond my time there. I'm pretty sure it reverted back to whatever was comfortable after I left. But yeah, I mean, you must encounter that a lot, like a resistance to change. Resistance.
Oh, absolutely. That's probably the number one problem I see. And in fact, if you've been in my office, you've seen that picture that I have hanging on the wall in the break room.
Yeah.
Of one of these ones from despair.com. There's a picture of the running of the bulls in Spain, and it says tradition. Just because we've always done it that way doesn't mean it's not incredibly stupid.
Yeah.
And I think that's the most important thing that I want people to think about when they're working with me. Like, please, for the love of God, don't just do something because that's the way it seems like we've done it.
Yeah.
I don't know how many times I've run across something that is costing hours of labor every week. Like, well, why isn't that part of this other automation process that we have over here? Oh, I don't know. We always done it that way. Well, why? And it turns out because there's this document that it used to require a signature, but it doesn't require a signature anymore. Right. But it never got moved over. But it's like that the joke about the roast pan. They're like, why do you cut the end off the roast? Well, I've always done it that way. And it turns out that it's because her mom never had a pan that was big enough for a whole roast.
God bless you.
Yeah.
When people sneeze.
Oh.
Very bizarre.
Well, it's because your soul got blown out, right? Or something like that.
The spirits, yeah. The evil spirits are trying to get you. Your body is expelling them through the sneeze.
Sure.
God blesses you, and you shall recover. Anyway,
yeah.
But the other thing too is, like, I think about where a lot of my time goes today, and I found that being creative is a lot easier because this is something people are always talking about. Like, oh, I got to be more creative, and there's millions of not millions, but there's certainly a multitude of self-help books like foster your natural creativity and all this stuff. But are people trying to be creative without a purpose? I think is an important question, because everybody wants to be more creative, I think, not just in their problem solving, but also just in life enriching ways. But I found that creativity came a lot easier once I was involved in what I felt like was, a purpose with like doing the show. And even though when I started doing it, I felt like I was looking for formulas, like what do other people do?
Sure.
And I should try to replicate what they're doing, because that seems to work. But it was fortunately through my own incompetence and not being able to replicate their formulas that I was able to kind of make my own and get comfortable with that. But there was always the motivation to keep trying things. And like, I think, I don't know how long School Sucks podcast would be if you looped it all together and played it all at once. I'm guessing, I don't know, 8 or 9 days, maybe. Could that be possible?
I don't know.
Oh yeah, if you add everything on our website, all the bonus content and that, sure. At least. So maybe there's like 20 solid minutes in that I would be like really excited about, that like really, really energized me when I did that thing, that moment. I remember I got up a couple days ago it was like a week ago, when the intro to the Alex Jones show, when I kind of just like that kind of came together in my head, and then I put it together and I listened to it. I got up and I started clapping.
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah, and I was really just like, that's great. And that propels me forward for 60 days. Sure. Just that another moment like that could come, but it comes from, there's a purpose attached to that. And I'm not just sitting there saying, oh, I hope I think of something creative to do, because, I'm involved in something that's important, and those channels are open and those things are going to come, I think. But I'm trying to think of other things that would have been helpful to me in the past. Can you think of any that were helpful to you? 843 join SSP, Skype in School Sucks Live. Someone in the chat says being creative means being vulnerable to make mistakes and fail. Absolutely. I don't remember who said it, but somebody said, I think he was an actor. I think I read this in a book that was about motivation. He said, show me somebody who's afraid to look bad, and I'll show you somebody you can beat every time. Right? You can't be afraid of looking like a total tard. And you never know. You can throw a lot of stuff at the wall, and a lot of it could be really dumb. Trust me. But once in a while, there's a wonderful moment in there. And you might have to, I find this too with a lot of the stuff that I listen to that might not be related to, Liberty or whatever, like a lot of the podcasts. You have to sit through a lot of spitballing before you get to like that one brilliant moment in a show. So, or a handful of brilliant moments in a show, depending on how good people are. But here's another one that I've found really helps, or that has helped me, is talking about what you're doing. I read another book where this was called Cerebral Sex.
Wow.
Fuck your friend's brains.
That sounds dangerous.
No, but I mean like an intercourse of ideas, right? Because I think when you're doing something that's creative that you want to have, not in an IP sense, but you want to have ownership over, you don't want to tell people what you're doing, right? You kind of want to keep it secret, and then just people will see it and they'll say, ooh, what a surprise, how great. But what I've found more that I actually benefit from sometimes, like one of my best strategy partners is Richard Grove from TragedyandHope.com. And I don't get to talk to him that much, but when I do, I'll say, here's what I'm thinking about doing. Oh, like we'll say, let's get on the phone and talk about X for half an hour. But I say, oh, before we talk about X, here's what I'm doing. And then an hour and a half later, we won't even have gotten to X yet, because there's just so many ideas about this one thing. So I think talking to people about what you're doing, and I think I annoy the shit out of people.
Sure.
With
this is why I like lunch. Lunch is perfect for that.
Yeah.
Where you sit around and you talk about what you're doing and get the ideas flowing.
But the other thing too, I think that, and this has been the trick for me, is balance, right? Like I'm real into this project, but if it's my whole life, then there's just eventually there's not going to be creative energy coming into it from anywhere, because where's it's going to come from? You know, it's just like kind of suffocating itself,
right?
Because it's all I do. I'm in this routine. It's all I talk about. Now, talking about it with other people is important, but only thinking about it, only obsessing about it is not a good thing. So what I try to do,
then you end up like, person who locks themselves in the basement with their own ideas for long periods of time, and then when they come out, they're crazy.
Yeah, like Howard Hughes.
Yeah,
you get real Howard Hughesy.
Right.
Yeah, and I don't want to be like Howard Hughes.
No.
In most respects, I do want to fly World War I aircraft while filming other people.
That can be done.
Yeah,
there's plenty of those planes flying around.
Yeah. Remember that in The Aviator at the beginning, that scene where he's like holding the You've never seen The Aviator?
Sorry.
It's amazing. It's Scorsese. You got to see it.
Okay.
But Howard Hughes is no role model. And I think he was mixed up with the government a little bit too, if I remember correctly.
He was. Is there a conspiracy theory about him?
Oh, there's all kinds of Howard Hughes. The Howard Hughes forgeries. There's all kinds of Howard Hughes conspiracies.
Okay.
But what was my point? Yeah, so you don't want to get too obsessed with something. And I keep saying this, I feel like, on the show, that you want your life to have balance, you know? So you want to get outside of that. And I think that some of the best inspiration that I've had for this, which is where most of my creative energy is going, came from something that wasn't related to this at all. So for example, so I don't like when I'm home on the computer, I do have to work and do stuff like respond to emails, which I can never get caught up on. And I'm trying to be a little bit more active on the new website, but in the background, I have to have something else going on. Last night, I watched Inside the Actors Studio with Robert Downey Jr.
Ooh, fun.
Amazing.
Love Robert Downey Jr.
He's the best. He's such an inspirational person, I think. So, yeah, and he like very entertaining and like really, you know, obviously not talking about these ideas at all, right? So that was good, but you see how much genius there is somewhere else in the world.
Sure.
And James in the chat said one of the biggest secrets to being creative is to love what it is that you're doing.
Yeah,
absolutely. So I think this would be the problem for people who are saying, I want to be creative, but they don't have anything. They're waiting for something that they're passionate about to come to them. And I don't think that's how it works, right? Like, why do you need to be more creative? You don't have anything to do. Go watch TV. Go on Facebook. Go on RedTube.
Mm-hmm.
You know how much shit there is there that will entertain you? Other people's creativity?
About an hour and a half a night.
Right. So, yeah, I think that there needs to be that spark that comes from somewhere. And maybe for some people, it just never comes. I don't know.
Well, I mean, that's the entire point of this article, right? Is that when you take away freedom, the creativity goes away.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. So the less freedom people would have, the less creative energy they would be able to. That makes sense.
Unless they're getting creative about how to get out of the prison that they're being put in.
That's true. Right. I don't know. Is there Soviet art? Let's do a Google search real quick. Is there such a thing as Soviet art? North Korea, don't they have like all kinds of crazy art and everything?
I don't know.
I'm thinking that most Soviet art is mostly going to return pictures of Nikita Khrushchev.
I have a picture in my mind of what it looks like. You see, like those posters of the dude with the hammer and the fist. Yeah, that's exactly what I think of.
All right, here's Soviet art. I'm sorry you can't see this if you're in the chat, but it's exactly what you'd picture. It's very red. It's very hammery. There's lots of soldiers. Yeah, it looks like this is okay. This is what you get for state commissioned art. And I mean, art suffered in this country too because of state control, just like education and science, because those are the things that change the world. And the government is not into that. So what's this lady doing? Maybe we should start a podcast where we do critiques of Soviet art. Lots of soldiers, lots of guns, lots of people working in groups.
Right.
This is all very Soviet. Lots of people raising sharp things over their heads with angry faces. No, this is something that's not real Soviet art. That's like anime or something. Let's try North Korean art.
Oddly looks kind of the same.
It looks kind of the same. The reds have been swapped out for, I would say, mostly yellows. And lots of men in ties, smiling Korean older gentlemen in ties in like circles. So they kind of look like they're the sun, with people kind of looking up worshipfully at them, and flags with soldiers and guns and helmets.
All right, now let's do Canadian.
Okay. Let's do Canadian. Do people enjoy our descriptions of art that you can't see? I mean, well, wait a minute. What am I talking about? If you're watching us, you're in front of a computer. So open a new tab and do the Google searches we're doing. Now, this is interesting.
Wow.
Canadian art.
Much more colorful.
Wait, that's Canada art. But this might be, Canada might be the name of an Indian tribe, which is why we're getting this. Oh, no, I guess not.
So we got colors. We got a very abstract.
Yeah.
It's not people working. There's no hammers.
No, this is real Canadian art right here. Canadian art, Canadian art, Canadian art.
Okay.
How did I do? Sorry, Canadians. I take that back. Yeah, you're right. It is all very like tribal, abstract. Oh, these are nice. I'm a big fan of Canadian art. I never knew.
Okay. All right. Now, what does American art look like? Let's go.
I'm guessing we're going to get a lot of Georgia O'Keeffe, right?
Yeah, I'm picturing like like Thomas Kincaid,
Norman Rockwell.
Yeah.
Oh, we get Pitchfork Man.
Yeah, it looks very Western.
This looks very North Korean. You have workers,
Yep.
some kind of sharp thing. it's yellowish.
So here's a question.
Sure.
I worry about my kids. Right?
Yeah.
Because like I don't want. I feel like I'm not creative in my life, and I'm kind of boring, and I don't want them to grow up to be boring like me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, is there anything I should do to like foster that in them, or will that happen naturally on their own if I don't tell them what to do?
What are you interested in at home?
I don't know. I read and watch shows. I mean,
do you talk to them about things that excite you, that are interesting to you?
I don't know. No, I mostly talk to them about what they're
like when I talk to my niece, right? Sometimes she'll want to withdraw a lot, which worries me, and watch TV, and like that's really more interesting to her than anything. So I'll sit down, and not in a way, hopefully not in a way that's annoying, but I think it's just habit for her to go to the TV when she's like when we do Sunday dinner at my mom's or something. So I'll go and I'll sit and I'll just start telling her a story about something that I think is interesting. And the response that I get almost all the time is she'll start talking to me, and then they'll be like, so like that connection opens, and then because kids want to talk, right?
Sure.
They want to tell you, but they want to see, I think, that especially for a parent, they want to see that you're interested in something too. So, I mean, you don't have to be there with like the sculpting wheel, just doing sculpting. There doesn't have to be that kind of creativity. But yeah, I think I think that trying to have those like more conversations, like I'm interested in this, and have it be something you really. What's something like kind of that a young person that could understand that you're interested in? Do you cook with them?
Man. Yes, sometimes. I don't do a lot of cooking myself these days, although I'll probably start pretty soon because I'm going to be working at home for the next few months.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they definitely cook with their mom. I woke up one day earlier this week. I came down. They were all making cookies together, and there was just stuff everywhere, just just everywhere, all over the floor, all over the counter, all over the walls, all over their faces. I mean, it was pretty hilarious.
Right. So, but didn't you say your son was interested, or your daughter? Someone was interested in experiments with food.
I'm sure they both
wanted to make nachos with potato chips or something.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, she got all. She was getting creative with the nachos. But I don't even remember how the conversation went, but something like, "Hey, we should." Oh no, I was eating nachos at home, and he's like, "What are you eating?" These are nachos. What are nachos? And we started talking about it, and then I would like to try them. It's like, what else can we put on nachos? And we started brainstorming about nachos. It's like, I would like to make nachos with potato chips.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, very interesting idea. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think there is a way to do that. There is the right chip that you could use.
Well, I mean, you make cheesy fries, right? I mean, it's the same thing. Potato with cheese and stuff on it. I mean,
right.
Same concept.
Right. So, Sarah says, kids love stories from our own heads. I remember my dad telling me and my sister the funniest made-up stories. Yeah, if you can make up stories, and you can make up stories and entertain a kid.
I'm horrible at that.
Think of a story that wouldn't be appropriate for kids, right? But then so it's a story they've never heard. But just like change the people, squirrels.
The nutsies?
No, make it like the plot of some porn that you saw, right? But they're squirrels and there's no sex. There's squirrels and you don't have to describe sex.
The squirrel brought over a pizza box.
James says, check out Rory's Story Cubes. Make your own Mad Libs, Sarah says.
Oh, that's okay.
Somebody else says, I make up bedtime stories off the top of my head and have them add things to happen. Right?
Yeah.
So you could always say, what do you think happens next?